anything, there's probably a lot of talented people that somebody in the industry sees what they could make out of them, and some people are willing to be moulded or change their initial ideas, or maybe that is what they want it to be. And some people are really kind of like anti, I don't want to change who I am, and don't want to think about, even entertain thinking about that idea of yourself as a product and this stuff. So I think that's his only, and I don't know really where he stands on it.
Don't know. I was saying to you the other day, like, I think when you're that age, all this stuff is, I don't think there's any point worrying about it. I think the most important thing is just focus on getting better at what you do. But
yeah, I would agree, but I also think if you don't spend any time thinking about it, you run the risk of somebody else making decisions for you. They're putting you in writing sessions. They're telling you to go and write.
Yeah, that does happen with
songs.
a lot of, like, you see a lot of young artists that get, well, some of them they get moulded into something and it works out well. Like, what was her name? That young girl. I've seen her perform in London when I was probably about 5-10 years ago now. What's her bloody name?
Nina Nesbitt.
No, I don't think I've spoke to you about it before. It's my fucking iPad like this.
You got an iPad?
No. I've got a little tablet shit, but this is not an iPad. Yeah, where's my iPad? Yeah. No, I've just got one of her songs on here. It's from ages ago, so I can just...
What is that? A creative?
This?
Sony?
It's just a music player. But
yeah, I know what it is, but I'm asking what brand is it?
It's Cowan. They're like not very well known, but they do make very good music players. This was expensive when I got it, but it's about 8 years old now. Taste of Colour. What's her name? She is in here, so I just need to find her.
Oh, I can't think of an example, but I just mean, basically, he's got
Ellie Goulding. She's got acoustic stuff from when she was performing. That I've got from when she was in London, and then when she was launched, like as a kind of pop music act, I guess, where she does a lot of pop dance. I don't even know. She does a lot of dance stuff.
Yeah, well now, but her first album wasn't. It was. Yeah.
She was very. My point is, she's a very attractive girl, which helped a lot. But the stuff I saw in London before she was signed and doing all that stuff was nothing like the package they built. So she was. They built a package around her, and they were very successful with it. Conversely, Jamie Woon, who I saw at one of the first open mics I went to in London, who also got a deal. They made a package around him, and the stuff that his first album was nothing like the stuff that I saw when he was doing acoustic stuff, and that didn't do very well. And he's had another album since. I think it's done a little bit better, but
remember the
it's
first
like
album, Night Air, was the lead track, wasn't it?
I didn't like it at all. It was like mega overproduced and nothing like. Just he's a really good guitar player, really good singer, nice guy, but I didn't really like. But those were two that I thought different outcomes completely. But I had this sense of when I saw the product that was put together, it was very much like a compromise relative to what originally the impression I got of them when I saw them performing in London on their own. Then there are other artists who don't have any of that, and they go the indie route, and some of them find success, some of them not so much, but they get obviously a lot more creative control.
But I think this guy's going to go really far because he loves it and has got a clear talent for it in terms of performing. I guess what they're doing now is, from what I understand, is had some meetings and they've said, go and write 50 songs, and suggested some writers, and then I'm just somebody, I wanted to write with him, so, but...
Yeah, it's good stuff, because, you just don't know, you want to get as many of these things as possible going, because out of every, 20 of these people, maybe one or two of them will have a very successful career, and then the rest won't, and that's just, the reality of the numbers and stuff, so you've got to kind of, with that stuff, probably just get as many eggs in different baskets as you can, so that the one that sticks, you're a part of, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was good to start that, and there's not really anything I can do other than set them up. And I was just very aware of how much time I've spent on my own playing, writing, because I was looking at him at 10 years, I'm 10 years older than him, and the position that he's in, and I feel like I used to be more like him, as in playing a lot with people, in different bands, just because you're at uni and college or something like that.
Different world, yeah. I mean, I look at you and think that. So imagine what it's like for me watching someone 16. It's frustrating at times because, it's. I mean, I look at good people like that who are young, and I think. I mean, I wasn't even. I was just starting out in my mid-20s in terms of getting my act together. So I was saying to you the other day, like really, the journey I'm going through at the minute is very much like these young people who are in their teens trying to learn and put it all together into a product. And but it just, unfortunately for me, I didn't start that journey until later on in life. But I think one of the problems with people like myself who start older is that they're in such a desperate rush to get ahead because they know, are very aware they've got limited time to make it work. And because of that, they just they can't ever put a good product together because they're in too much of a rush. Young people are just not in a rush, which works so much in their favour because they've got that time.
I think there is an element of rush, because
less so, and I think it probably varies
less
from
so if
individual
you
to
are
individual.
aware that there is a window that I remember being told at uni up to 25, and then you can forget it. I think if you can think a bit outside the box, i.e., how do I look? And not that you have to look young, but just, I guess it totally depends on what avenues you're going for. If you want to go and try and get Justin Bieber's audience, you can never.
You can't do that at 35. There's different avenues. There's a type of, you can become a musician that is. There are markets you can appeal to even as an older musician, definitely. But you're totally right. They're different to the markets that you try and get into as a young person like Taylor Swift when she was young.
But then sometimes I'll think, these kids have got the talent, the drive, age on their side.
The looks.
Those,
yeah.
But what they don't have is the experience that the way I think now is not the way I thought then. And it's taken all the experiences in my life to create the mindset I have. And that is a really big strength. And it is also something that people in the industry are going to be wanting to see if you have, because if they're going to be investing in you, they need to know that you've got some vision for the future and how you're going to deal with all the different things that are going to come along. So I don't think it's all. Sometimes I look at, like, say, Josh and be like, fuck, he's got everything going for him. But actually, he's still got a lot to learn.
He's going to be 35 in 15, 20 years as well, and you just don't know how it's all going to pan out. So
that's another thing. It looks all promising.
But, I mean, you know what... when I first started all this, as you're probably aware, like a few of the artists who I totally fell in love with, and I was certain they're going to make it, they're going to break through, and most of my favourite ones didn't. The two or three, I could say most. There's only two or three that I completely fell in love with, but none of them went forward in the way I'd expected. And this is what we were saying the other day. Like, it's as much as you've got a sense of reality in your own head, like it doesn't pan out the way you'd hope or expect. Sometimes it's tricky, but it's not the thing you see with younger people that have done some work on their stuff is like they've just got that sense of opportunity in front of them that basically narrows as you get older. Like we say, so like if you're 12 and very good, you've got the opportunity to potentially go in that direction of Bieber or who's the girl, Taylor Swift. But you don't really have that option as you get into your mid-20s or 30s. My view is that basically your only chance as you get older is to have a really, really good product together one way or another. That's really what's going to differentiate you from the market. Like, so Tommy Emmanuel, for example, he's a very, very good guitar player, one of the best in the world. he's got an audience purely because of his ability. Nobody else can do. He's a market of what? He's a market. He's competing with nobody basically because he's got a product that nobody else has got. So that's one way you can differentiate yourself and build something as you get older. But obviously, the challenge of building a great product is no small one. It's very, very difficult. As you know, I've frustratingly found over the last 10 years, like it's very, very hard to get something very good together. So that's one way you could do it. There's other ways, there's ways where, like, what's his name? C6 Steve did it in an interesting way. He's not necessarily the most talented artist, but he had a certain, the way he dressed, the image they had, it was like you could see, like, okay, this is a product, but it wasn't necessarily the way he was differentiating himself in the market was different to the way I've just explained, I guess. So there's, even as you're older, there are different ways.
Well, I guess either your talent is so supreme that that's all you need to differentiate yourself, and that is a real minority because you have to have been playing for such a long time at a young age to develop those skills.
Very, very difficult.
Otherwise, it's like your talent, but your story. That's why Ed Sheeran is like so huge because of his story with. I think
I know what you
one
mean.
man, a guitar against the world.
Because he's
People
kind of
get behind
different.
that.
Yeah, the way he broke is different to like Bieber and Swift, and like we were saying. I mean, he was, but he's kind of a good example because whilst he's super, super popular, he does, the product that he's got is more, it's definitely more kind of, I guess, rough around the edges than these real, like, moulded pop acts like Taylor Swift and like Justin Bieber. And I think that's part of the reason he's has success, because he's a lot more relatable. I mean, he's like boy next door. You could imagine him living next door to you. Oh, it's Ed next door, he plays guitar. Just like I hear you playing upstairs. It's basically this, he's just some dude. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that works well for him. Cause
definitely, because people watch him and they see that could be them. If he's on stage, that could be them. So, because it's not like so separated from.
Yeah, I mean, Oasis were a little bit like that as well. I remember, like, their one of their things that Noel used to talk about, and they used to talk about, even though they were very, like, back then, like, pop stars were much more like, bravado and ballsy type, bit like caricatures in a sense, but they did have this kind of thing that they spoke about, like that they came up. They were just like kind of working class lads that came up, just basically off their own back and all that stuff, and people definitely latched onto that. I think people love the idea that there's a shot that anyone can find success in this. Like, even if the odds are against you. Like, I mean, I fall in love with this all the time. Like, it's like you get the sense there's a chance that somebody who's like not got much going for them can find a way, and like that, but that can motivate. Even if people don't find success at whatever they expect,
and I think that's why it's so powerful.
This is why, in my view anyway, like, this is, people want to achieve something, basically, and they deep down, everyone wants to achieve something, like, meaningful. And that, this kind of thing does feed into that a lot. And I think it's a good thing, man. I like the idea that
I would agree with you.
It bothers me that I see great artists that some of them are not going to ever find a way through, and the reasons for that, like, are partly kind of trivial in a sense. You think, well, I don't know. I mean, I understand it. It's a business at the end of the day, and basically, people are doing a risk assessment on you, not me, but anyone, like, as an act. You've got money to invest. You're essentially gambling. You're putting a lot of money into something, and most of them won't go anywhere.
That's coming from the perspective of those putting the money in.
But
even when they put the money in,
I understand why the people in that industry don't take as much risk as maybe people assume they should do, because at the end of the day, like, it's just, it's a business. There's a bottom line, and they've got to basically they've got to do a risk assessment on everyone they put their money into.
Yeah, but what I was going to say is, if everybody got the same investment, the same publicity, I don't think everyone would be as successful. Some people are going to connect with the audience more, and
some people
the
find
public generally don't like two extreme things or polarizing things. So most of the big artists in the world, even the big companies, or like think about supermarkets or things that are huge.
Some of them are though, like you said. I was just watching this like documentary about Slim Shady this morning, and like when he came around in early 2000s, like he was massively controversial. He was like the biggest artist of that decade, basically, or one of, at least probably in the top three in terms of money generated. Like, and he was really controversial when he came around. So some of them are different. Like I think what happened, like Nirvana were very different when they come around. It's people forget, like, because once these like, Oasis were quite different when they came around. Like people forget because.
Well, even Ed Sheeran was different.
Once they come, everyone's mimicking, everyone's copying, and it just that unique product gets lost within a year or two because there's so many other artists now that are doing something similar. But so I know what you mean. I do agree to an extent, but there are exceptions to that rule where, and I think what happens is basically everything kind of, typically speaking, things tend to narrow down and streamline, and music tends to over time become more and more appealing to broader and broader markets because that's what generates money. And then eventually what happens is it's so broad that it becomes very, very bland. And then an artist like Nirvana comes along with a product that's completely unique and is like very niche in a sense, but because everything around that product surrounding it is like has been completely streamlined into like just total like syrupy standardized mess. You see it with the gaming industry, which I will go into in a sec. They then stand out in a massive way, and then that one unique artist like finds huge success out of the blue, and then overnight everyone wants the next grunge band or whatever. It happens in all these industries. Like in the gaming industries, it's kind of happened where the bigger game developers, all the games get streamlined down over time. All the systems in the games get simplified, and basically everything becomes like super broad in scope, so that it appeals to the broadest market. The stories become less controversial, whatever. And there's like everything has to appeal to a broader and broader market, which means that it becomes like bland basically over time, and then you get a developer like who will working on his own in a bedroom, who will come out with a game that's just no big developer would have taken a risk on, and then they're a millionaire within 6 months, and all of a sudden like there's another 1 million Me Too products copying that game. But the idea is kind of the same thing as like the bigger companies. They have to create products that appeal to broader markets, which leaves gaps, is what I mean. Leaves gaps where the thing I watched yesterday, it was talking about like if you fill a jar up with ping pong balls, like it was kind of talking about mainstream media versus alternative media, but it's the same thing. Like the kind of the big labels and the big artists are the ping pong balls. And then your indie labels and these kind of unique artists we're talking about, basically they're like, you pour sand in that, they're like filling all the kind of smaller gaps and niches that the bigger labels just will never be able to fill really, because they're just not built for that. Yeah, it's interesting. I like this kind of thing. It's weird. You'll find this more and more as you get older. Like it's weird meeting younger people and interacting with them and thinking about what you were like then, and like thinking where you're at now, and like thinking about how you change and all this stuff.
I think that is something
it gets different.
I struggle with, even on like if I listen to his music and be like, okay, it's okay, and I'm comparing it to me as a writer now, obviously all within my opinion, but I have to take a step back and be like, oh yeah, but what kind of songs was I writing at 16? What was my lyrical content? And then remember, I've grown, right? So you can't judge everyone on the same.
Yeah, they're all at different points, and I've found the opposite of that. Frankly, most of the time is like most of my heroes are younger than me. Like Matt Corby, who was a much better artist than I am now, even at 16. Adele, the same. Like all these young artists that I look up to, who are better than I am now and miles better than I was then. And it's the same thing. They started their journey much younger than I did. So by the time they were 16, they'd been 10 years sat doing it. we were talking about the other day, and I'd done nothing.
But
So
I feel like that's...
in that sense, you're completely right. It's just the opposite comparison. But what I'm saying is, everyone's at different stages in that journey. It's very important to understand, at least in my mind, like where you're at in that journey of getting your product together. And I think a lot of artists misunderstand where they're at. They think they're further ahead or further behind than they are. And when they compare themselves to other artists, they're thinking in terms of where they're at, both at now versus like, well, hang on a sec, when did they start? Like, what is their story? How much time did they put into this versus me? Like, in a lot of ways, what I've found is it always makes sense when I actually pick apart someone's story, like why they are where they're at that point. Like, I remember seeing when I saw, as one example, when I saw Jeremy play for the first few times I spoke to him, and he was telling me about his backstory with the band, playing like for a lot of years live in Australia, like, and doing all that stuff, and like his history growing up and stuff, and it immediately made sense to me, like, okay, so this is his story, like, leads to this point. Generally speaking, like, if you ask someone their story in detail, like, it will always lead to the point that you see. Like mine does. Like, if people ask me, like, how does this, like, make sense? Like, it makes complete sense if you understand, like, where I started, where I'm like working towards and all that stuff. But I'm kind of just reinforcing what you've said there and just kind of adding a little bit more detail to it, because I think it's very key for people to when they compare themselves to others, to not do that direct comparison, to actually think, okay, more kind of objectively and like actually in a broader kind of more zoomed out way, like where did they start, where are they now, where did I start, where am I now, where are they going, where am I headed, like, and kind of that way you can actually feel a lot better about seeing an artist and thinking, yeah man, they're better than I am, they're much better, or they're not really that good. That's the thing, people write people off because they're not very good. But then if you zoom out and say, well, hang on, they only started playing a couple of years ago, they're young, maybe in 10 years, if they work real hard, they will be very, very good at what they do. Because that's what ultimately determines somebody's ability, is like how much time they've put in the background before. So it gives you ability to look at people and judge them more on that broader perspective, rather than just saying like, oh, he's crap, oh, he's amazing. Because when you see people that are better than you, it can be a bit demoralising. When you see people who aren't as good as you, you can kind of just be on your high horse a bit. But we were all there. Everyone sucked when they started, and it's not the case that everyone's going to get amazingly good.
I mean, some people will probably, and there are cases of people that just have a natural ability for something, but they've definitely had to learn various aspects of their career, like Justin Bieber, amazing singer from the first videos you've seen of him, but he'll have had to learn a lot. I don't really know how much he writes. Well, a lot of those people that
start young, they don't have the with the singing anyway, they're just learning from a blank slate, so that's why they're natural, in the sense that as adults, you often, the reason the struggle is we're having to undo and unpick problems that were created in the teenage years or something. So anyone that starts young, they don't have the time to make mistakes. So if they learn the right way the first time, then they'll sound great from 6 years old. Like your Bruno Marses, etc.
But I guess the thing with depending on,
so they still have to learn everything. I'm just saying that they have a better starting point because it's blank, and they learn the right way from an age. So.
Yeah, if you've made mistakes, you have to unlearn and then relearn. It's twice as hard. It takes twice as long.
It's tricky.
The thing with somebody like Justin Bieber, I feel like it was his manager that really kind of honed the talent that was there and directed him and created this his persona, the product that he is, based on what he knew of him, and that's because he's had a good manager with that foresight. The thing with him, though, is he hasn't... How can he be relatable to the everyday person, because he's never lived that life, and that is why someone like Ed
not really
Sheeran
got
Oasis,
not much of a story other than
it's so far removed from.
And he's been famous since he was a child.
But I
basically.
think people don't really.
It's tricky.
Well, at least I feel like with a lot of in the pop industry, that's overlooked what their story is. I mean, I just mean in the like huge hits, but yeah, I'm probably quite wrong in that actually. I'm sure it's really thought about in the business.
I mean, I've watched Justin Bieber's videos from when he was very young, and not when he was that young. I've watched him more recently, but some of the stuff I've seen that he's just done with the piano and singing and guitar and singing was very good. Like simple but very well executed, and singing within his ability, which is like something that I haven't done up till probably the last few weeks in my life, really, in a lot of ways, and that is, he just, it's easy. The mistake people make with a lot of these artists that they see like him is that they miss like some of these very basic details that we talk about in terms of just a very simple, clean approach without any clutter and things like this, and they focus on like the complexity of the music as an example, or how many the range of the singer, or like how basically how much are they showing off or something. I'm thinking of a singer like Christina Aguilera is probably a good example of someone that's kind of more of a singing at you than singing to you, I guess you'd say. But this people don't value that basic stuff that a lot of these young artists get together very, very quickly, and they think that it's trivial. But that those basic ingredients are universal across like all types of music, across all ages. It doesn't matter like what style people do. If they don't have that basic approach correct, like they'll always struggle to find an audience and success. I mean, I talk about it on this channel all the time, but that is so key, but so easily missed because it's so simple and so subtle in a sense, and it's very, very hard to get back to, especially as an adult when you're older. And
I guess in a way, I'm just like imagining it like a cake, and the basic ingredients of the cake are the sponge part of it, and then all the decorations. When you walk past the cake window, you don't go, oh look, that's great sponge. You're thinking about how it looks, and it's so the idea being that the focus isn't on that ever. Like when you're first looking, you have to have an interest or think past the surface to understand that.
Well, yeah, it's like you say, you can if you're focusing on the decorations, which is what a lot of people do, the details. Inside that cake could just be a load of dog shit, or it could be an amazing cake, but it will look the same on the outside. And that's kind of an analogy to what the mistake people make is like when they're learning about singing technique or just being a good musician in general. Is very easy to focus on the icing and not on the ingredients, just the basic ingredients that need to go into the cake to make it a nice tasting sponge.
And then you can put that stuff...
Well, yeah, it's very easy to decorate something.
It's like you can create all these decorations, but they just fall over...
Yeah. I mean, that's the position I found myself in for years and years and years, is I had all these details that in my head, I was like, yeah, man, this is like, this should be good. Why isn't it good? And it took me years to slowly realise, like, whilst the intent was good, what I wanted to create was good, like my basic ability wasn't good enough to put that product together. So like for a long time I've just been trying to get back to that, but it's a tricky thing to do, because I think it's more natural for younger people to be able to spend time focusing on some of these more basic principles, and I think it's a little bit harder as we get older to go back to thinking about that, because in a sense it feels like you're not going forward, you're actually going back. Most of my journey the last 10 years has felt like I'm just going back and figuring out what I missed when I learned it the first time, and that's pretty much been 90% of the last decade for me. And it's like when people think about learning to play music or learning to sing, they think more typically of this, I'm going forwards into something,
Yeah.
rather than, right, what did I miss? What is the reason this isn't working? And there must be something I missed when I learned it the first time, or that there must be some basic things I'm missing. And in a sense, some of those basic things can be so simple that when you do start to discover them, it can almost be embarrassing or difficult, because they're so simple that you can almost think, how on earth did I miss that?
Yeah, or
Like,
I would be like, is that really it?
Yeah.
But something that happened like in yoga that just kind of spoke to me, a really simple thing that the teacher was like, don't do this too fast because you kind of miss the focus of what we're doing. It was just some like twist or something, like rolls. But the thing is, that is my personality. I like to do things quickly, and what I'm realizing more and more is I'm missing the point, or I'm putting, like, even like the way you use your body, putting the strain on the weaker part of my body. But I can kind of pick things up or do things to a point, but then it starts to hurt, and I realize actually I'm doing it all wrong. So I've got to rethink it all, and I definitely think that idea of going back is one that kind of almost stops people wanting to relearn, because it can feel it.
It's hard. It's harder.
It's like you've got halfway up the mountain and you realise you can't get to the top, and you got to go all the way back down to start.
Find another route, because
Yeah.
you've got halfway up and there's something blocking that route, so you've got to go down halfway down and then back up another route. And that's why it's hard, because your ego takes a hit. You realise, I'm not quite where I thought I was, and that cycle goes on and on, to where you go down a bit, you climb a bit, no, wrong way, down a bit, climb, and it can be. That really is the learning process, but people don't think of it that way. They think of it in terms of always moving up and forward.
Yeah, so
but
the idea
really,
of going
the
back
true
down.
learning process is forwards 3 steps, back a step, forwards 3 steps, back 2 steps, forward. And it's always this kind of sense of this. And over time, eventually, you do get much, much better, but the process isn't as anywhere near as streamlined as people make. I mean, you see this with successful artists, that some of them do kind of take missteps. This isn't just unique to people that don't find success. It's just even the most talented singers will have some of this work to do, of going back and trying to figure out some of the details that they missed. It's just that the most talented singers miss less details on the way up, so they'll get 3/4 of the way up the right way, and then they'll have to navigate that last quarter a little bit up and down, versus somebody like me that went all the way up, thought they went all the way up, and then had to come basically back to the very beginning to start again. There are a few singers that managed to basically figure all of it out. I'm thinking of like your Alan Stone or your Matt Corby, or singers like this. They also have their own challenges, but those guys are like few and far between. Most singers that we would refer to as talented don't get that far up without taking a few kind of missteps on the way, or missing out some of the details. The way you see this is singers who sound very good, but they don't necessarily have a massive amount of range. They've got limited range, but the range they do sing that within is very, very good and sounds professional. Like let me think of a good example.
What about Ed Sheeran? I don't think he's got a massive range.
I'm thinking of maybe Chris Martin from Coldplay, or there's a few out there. I'd have to kind of there's more of those than there are of. But the idea is that they've kind of narrowed down the scope a little bit so that it all sounds professional. Lucy Rose, she's an acoustic singer from London. People won't know her on the channel, but she's a good example. Very good singer, sounds very professional, but relatively limited scope in what she does. Those are the singers I'm referring to when I say singers that they learn the right way, but they just don't necessarily get all the way up. And if they wanted to develop more, they have to kind of go and face some more challenges, basically, or just stick with that one sound that sounds nice for their whole career, which plenty of them do. Um, um, and uh, and the other example would be, so you've got singers like that. You've got singers who...
I think another thing that I... Sorry, it's like
Don't worry, yeah,
different.
I was going to say something else, but it's not really that relevant, so carry on.
It's like, if you've kind of naturally got something, like when I started singing, I knew I could sing. Like, it wasn't like, oh God, I can't. I wasn't like the good singers in the class, but I knew I had a voice and people kind of liked it. So the idea that I would then have to learn and work hard at something that just came naturally was quite hard for me to accept.
That's a really good point. I think that's one of the reasons. Like, what's her name?
It's a bit like if you've
Christine...
got things easy.
Yeah.
When the struggle comes, you're like, why? Like,
well, yeah, it's more tricky. Like, it was easy for me because I struggled so much that I had no choice but to try and improve one way or another. And I think when I see singers like, I've mentioned again, Christina Aguilera struggling, part of the reason she's struggling is because she's got so much of her life and ego invested into that thing that grew from her childhood, basically, that it becomes really, really difficult to take a hit, to realise, like, there's something I'm missing here, like there's something that I'm kind of gone off track somewhere, because your whole personality and life is based around this image and character that you've built up. It's hard, much harder for those singers to find help. Some of them do, but
well, it's kind of like
tricky.
Like a beautiful ice sculpture or a beautiful chandelier that's just amazing, but you smack it one and it'll shatter. Whereas up against something that's like hard aluminium that's had loads of hits, but it's not going to fall down or it's not really going to break. That's like basically people. Somebody that's not had much to deal with versus somebody that has had to deal with a lot. It's the same with like feeling vulnerable. It's not that it doesn't hurt, it's just that somebody gets used to the feeling and doesn't think too deeply about it or just accepts it, as opposed to being like, oh my God, my world shattered, somebody didn't like me. I don't know, but we're just repeating this.
Also, I was thinking as well, what tends to happen with some of these younger people that start and kind of find their way quickly is they get a lot of positive reinforcement from their peers at school and their parents or older people, because they're seen as young and talented, and all of that positive reinforcement like propels them forward to work harder and gives them this sense of possibilities. Whereas as you get older, it's frankly the opposite. You'll get I've many times over the last years had people in my family and friends who've kind of just said, not really, some of them have said it directly, but more you just get this sense of like, dude, this isn't working. Like, you're getting old, man. When are you going to get a real job? So like you can have both those, that type of thing, those social expectations can kind of work for you or against you depending on where you're at in life. And luckily for me, like I've been at this so long that like it just kind of bounces off me now, because I kind of just resign myself to like, this is the path I'm taking, and where basically put the chips in, and wherever they fall, like I'll be happy with. In a sense, I'm happy to just, like I was saying to you the other day, like just focus on the process of getting better at my teaching, at my music, and whatever comes of that. And I'm not, I've kind of just trained that into myself just through having so many years of sucking and failure and struggling and just figure this all out. It's like, it's very much easier for me now than it was like when I started 10 years ago. The hardest time was probably, in some ways, the last 4 or 5 years has been very tricky, just because in a lot of ways I've been very close to what I wanted, but at the same time almost a million miles away at times. And it's like I've felt like a millimetre away for like years. Whereas before that, I knew I was miles away. I knew I had tons of work to do, and it was easier to find solutions because the problems were so big that when I found something, it would just work, and it would propel me massively forward. Whereas the last few years have just been like edging forward and then nope, wrong way, and edging forward, and then it's like never getting there. Like every time I think I'm getting forward, it's like not quite what I think every single time, and that's been very difficult because many times I've said to you, like, this video is amazing, like this video is going to break or whatever it is, and it's like then it doesn't break, and then a few weeks later I'm watching it back and I'm thinking about things like, yeah, there's just something off, man. There's something not quite right about it. And I kind of convinced myself that sometime I'm going to create this video that brings everything together for me, and it might not happen and it might, but I always feel like I am better like than I was, and so it's kind of addictive. You feel this sense of, but I am better now, so I don't know what the results are going to be this time, because last time I know the results weren't good, but I wasn't as good as I am now, so maybe this time, now I'm better, maybe the results will be different. Like, it's hard to know, especially with the internet. You do, like, you know, thousands of videos that get nowhere, and you might have one video that finds some success, and all of a sudden you've got a job. You know, it's many of these channels that you know, they've just have one video that went viral that had, you know, 5 million views, and then they've got a business and they've got a job, and you know, some, you know, Boyce Avenue is a good example. I mean, he started years ago, but if you look at his very early videos, the quality is not that good in terms of the production, the camera, sound, and all that, but the product is there. The product is very, very good. You know, you talk about like artists that can put together covers of that quality. There's not many of them. So now, you know, you start to think, well, what were the things that made him go viral? Like, part of it was that the product was there and it was very, very good. And when people watched that video, like, they were like, wow, this is amazing. Versus, you know, the thousands of other musicians putting up music online, like myself, where, yeah, it's pretty good. Like, what's next? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's very, I'm saying, you know, we were talking recently about this idea that even to have a chance of finding some success in certain industries and stuff, like, there's like there's like just a prerequisite of, you've got to have your shit together, no matter what style of music, no matter what, you know, no matter what niche you want to fit into. Like, basically everyone that's earning a living doing this is pretty damn good, including Justin Bieber's and Taylor Swift's. Like, they're better than people realise in a lot of ways. Much better, frankly, than a lot of people realise. Their product connects with people on a not on a technical level, but on a one-to-one. They when I sing, people listen type level, and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. This idea of they've got the right basic ingredients. The music's not that technical. The music's not that, you know, it's not like jazz, very impressive technically and very logical, put together methodically. It's just, it connects with people on a basic level. And any music that is technical should still connect with people on that basic level. Tommy Emmanuel's a good example. Very, very technical musician, but there's a human element to him. When you watch him perform, when you watch him interact with audiences, there is a human element to what he's doing that connects with people. Now, that's why he'll continue to have a reasonable audience until a large audience until he retires. Whereas some of these other guitar players, who are also technically amazing, like I'm thinking of like Steve Vai or Joe Satriani, some of these electric guitar players who are very technical. They're super technical, but they somewhere along the line they've lost some of that human element. Stevie Ray Vaughan, who's here, he was a perfect mixture. This guy, check him out. He had a human element and he had technique. He was one of my first musical heroes, but he had both. He had the technique and the product, but he had this human element, these basic ingredients that made people connect to them, even though when they weren't necessarily guitar players. And that's the thing, like, Tommy Emmanuel connects with people that aren't guitar players. I'm not really a guitar player. I play guitar, but I'm not a guitar player like that. I don't have time.
Not necessarily guitar players, but guitar kind of, what do you call them? Like, where they're like mad on it.
Geek, virtuoso.
Yeah, geeks,
I don't know.
Guitar geeks.
Yeah, guitar nerds. I don't even know what you call it, but yeah, someone like you, Steve Vais and you, Joe Satriani, is like the only people listening to them are guitar players, nobody else. Whereas Tommy Emmanuel, Stevie Ray Vaughan, those types of artists who have this a bit more of a balance between that human element and the technical part of music. They have fans who aren't guitar players. I had a good point to make as well, kind of further on from that. It's kind of gone from my head, but
it's to do with the human element.
Yeah, that's. I mean, in my view, that's why jazz has just failed and died over the last 50 years. Is that there's no human element. That's why only men play jazz, because it's men that tend to be much more biased towards the systems and the logic and all that stuff, and more disconnected from the human element of life. This goes into what we was saying about, talking about recently the difference between men and women, but yeah, I mean, I think there's always got to be this sense of balance. That's why great pop music is very, very good, because there is a balance between the human side of the mind and the kind of machine side of the mind, I guess you'd say, or the logic and the intuition. And that's why it can appeal to broader markets than something like jazz ever will, because most people are leaning one way or the other. So if you've got a style of music that has both, there's a better chance of it connecting with some people. Whereas you've got a narrow audience if it's more just one-sided. Have you broke your wrist before?
Why?
There's scars here.
No, that's from when I got electrocuted.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Brutal, man. My sister's boyfriend was telling me about his electrocution. He's an electrician. It was quite serious. He could have died.
Yeah,
he
I
was
should
very
have
lucky.
died.
You were saying about that it's a trait of yours to want to be in a rush.
Yeah.
It's very I was very, very similar as well. I've trained it out myself over the years. I'm almost the opposite nowadays, where people are like, they can't believe how patient I am in a sense. But it's that goes back to what we were saying earlier about comparing ourselves to others and where we're at versus where other people are at. Knowing a broader context to people's story. It's easier not to be in a rush when you understand exactly where you're at. So like, I don't compare myself to artists my age. I compare myself to artists where they're at after they'd been doing it a certain amount of time, and trying to kind of figure out like where I'm at in terms of what I'm putting together more.
I feel like it's harder with...
It makes it easier to not be in a rush.
Well,
anyway.
It's definitely just generally difficult in life, because there is a timeline to things like...
Yeah, you're going to die soon. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, when are you going to start having a family?
Yeah.
Like, am I going to buy a house? I need a certain amount of money. Yeah.
Family pressures, all sorts of things that you get as you get older that you don't have when you're a kid. It's brutal, man. It's brutal, this.
Yeah, so you you feel like you're running against a clock and you don't know. And it's that thing that we talked about the other day, and you never know this, but with some careers it's much more, if I train to be a doctor and I do my studies, there will be a job at the end of it. It's not like, oh, well, but do we like you? No, we need doctors with music, like as a sportsman or a sportswoman. You become the fastest runner in the UK. You'll make the team. There's no question. Just be the fastest runner.
Yeah.
If you've got the possibility to get there and you just work.
Yeah.
We're in a different market where you still don't know, even if you put the work in, and the ruler keeps changing on what people like, and and then you kind of really questioning what. That's why it's very much a passion based industry, because you can't really base it on any logic. In some, I don't know, there is, and you.
Some things you can, but yeah, you're totally right. I couldn't agree more in what you're saying. Really, is that there's so little to hold on to. Eventually, you've got to kind of just try and stay on what you can control, and let some of it go to an extent that some of the stuff you don't have control over, because it can drive you mad. Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, when people talk, I mean, it is when you start getting into some of these deep things, it is like life's brutal, but some industries are way more brutal to try and get into than others. I guess I just mean brutal in the sense
I'm just thinking that I
so
guess
few guarantees.
You really have to look into yourself at that point. Like you said, I've resigned myself to this. Like, you know why you're doing it. You probably still have dreams that are maybe slightly outside of what you're doing on a day-to-day. But you really I have to go, okay, what do I really care about? Do I want to have a family? At what point am I going to go, I'm not doing that anymore, or I'm doing that less?
Yeah, once when you have kids, like it becomes a very different equation, and it's.
But then you hear stories of people that have had that, and you don't know if your story is going to keep going along this path, and at some point you're going to get some success, or if you're going to be one of those that gave up but could have been. And I felt like yesterday when I was like, thought I'd play the piano, and was like, fuck, I haven't played this for so long, and I'm losing that ability, or I'm losing my ability on the guitar because I'm not pushing myself anymore. Or are you going to be someone that starts a family, kind of puts it to one side, comes back to it, gets success, and you have it? It's just like, and then so you have to go, what do I really care about? And
it comes down to like, what do you care about most? Like, because some people, I mean, I watched this documentary about Fleetwood Mac, and one of the women in that band in the documentary ends up in tears, saying that basically, like, she sacrificed having children for that band and that success, and obviously it hurt her a lot. So she had to make that choice, or she made that choice, and there was a price to pay for that choice. Obviously she's a millionaire, very successful, great band that people will be listening to probably in 200 years. But the point is you're right. At the end of the day, like, every choice in life has consequences, and the question is, like, which consequences are you more happy to kind of live with and stand by? Like, am I going to look back in 30 years and have had no kids, no success, and be comfortable with that? Or am I going to have a family, get a more stable type of job, be happy with that? Maybe I will find some success if I keep playing on. Who knows? It's very difficult. You can talk about averages, but then obviously there are people that find a way through. So it's very tricky. I think each person's got to find their own answer in terms of that stuff, because
it's determined on what kind of people you have in your life. Like, if you're in a relationship, you're now thinking not just for you but somebody else, and you're weighing up all the possibilities of that. Will I meet somebody else that's better suited to me? Is this the best? Like, how will you know? What are the reasons you're basing your decisions on? Like, is it logic, or there's all these things that you have to think about. And then sometimes you could argue that as a writer and as a performer, all that stuff can be put into the writing, put in the performance of how you deliver something and communicate to someone. But at the same time, like, it feels a bit of a waste. You could be writing and practicing and getting further along that path. I mean, it's the same kind of discussion. And
all of it ultimately comes down to, like, you've kind of, in life, like, there's never any certainty, and it's a case of basically, I'm just going to go down this path and see what happens, and like, that path you choose, like you say, for each person it's going to be different, because some people, whilst they're great musicians, aren't necessarily like as cut out for dealing with some of these things as other people are, and eventually they decide, actually, I'm going to just, I'm going to have a family and enjoy my life and not have to deal with any of this. Because there's, like, so many upsides to just having a normal job and starting a family, and all these stresses that we have, like, they're not even in the equation for some of these people, because they've just got a stable job, they've got a family, they own a house, they're paying the bills, they're just
but when
having
you've got a dream,
barbecues and all that stuff,
ambition. Because I'm thinking about the Fleetwood Mac girl. It's like, but that thought, like, the opposite of that is having a family and being totally discontent and thinking, I wish I could have done this. And
if she'd have made that decision, then she would have never been in Fleetwood Mac and never have had that. And that's the thing with all these successful artists, like,
fuck, that's what I wanted, and I didn't go for it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the main reason why I stick with what I'm doing, is because I'd rather be dying and think, well, I gave something a go in my life, even if it didn't work, or it did, than I compromised and wasn't that happy, but I don't like that
Yeah,
idea.
yeah. I think people
I'd-
make the decisions, but I would say I'm more on the side of I'd rather be unhappy and tried than unhappy and fail, like give up.
Unsuccessful and tried than
No, but I'm because I
than not
could be
tried.
unhappy. Like I haven't got anywhere. I've tried,
Mm,
and I don't have a family, and I don't have the things that I also wanted.
mm.
So there's an unhappiness in that, but there's a contentment in the fact that I tried, but it's also I didn't get to where I wanted to go, so I feel a bit shit about that. Versus being unhappy, but having, I don't know, you could talk about it for a lifetime.
I know.
And never.
Yeah, I mean, there's no answers to this stuff, no easy ones, and all the answers involve compromise of one degree or another. So it's it's just a question of what you're willing to miss out on and what you're not willing to miss out on, and then that's that really. Because it's like there's a cost. Every decision there's a cost. It's just a question of what you're willing to pay and what you're not willing to pay at the end of the day. So it's difficult because there's no right answers. Just to finish up, the thing I was going to say is you're saying about relationships and all this stuff is the tricky thing about being a person is you say you have 1 or 2 or 3 relationships over a 10-15 year period, like it's such a small pool of experience really. If you think about, for example, if I could live 1,000 years and have hundreds of relationships with different people, you would be able to you would make massively different decisions about, like, you meet somebody, you would know instantly like if they're going to be suitable or not very, very quickly. One of the hard things about being a person is you've got this very narrow window of time, and you've got you're on your second relationship. You're basing what you think of this person just on the only experience you've got is that other relationship, and it's like it's like a very narrow kind of pool of experience to draw from. But because we're not alive for very long, say for example, I think this happens a lot, is you grow up with a dad that's shitty, and you have your first couple of boyfriends so that shitty men or whatever. Maybe your mum had a boyfriend when you were growing up and things like this, and he was an asshole. And like this narrow pool of men who were the key men in your life growing up, like were all negative. And so you could have the same like with men as well. You could have it in reverse. It's just a way to explain it. The idea is like you get these people who have this narrow window they're looking through, but they kind of extrapolate that to everyone and think like, but really like that was just they were unlucky. They happened to get 4 in a row that weren't very good, and you won't know it until you meet someone snuzzle. Vice versa, you could have you go out with your dad and your mum's an alcoholic or something, and or whatever it is. But the point is that it's really hard to really understand.
Well, ultimately, your experience determines your view on life, and then what you want to take from life and what you think you can achieve. So if you're that person, you might be like, well, I don't want to be in a relationship because men are shitty, and then you just not easy, but like you go, right, I'm focusing on this. Mm-hmm. Whereas somebody that's had good relationships and sees that as the most important part of their life would focus on that side. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it's just a side point really, just this idea of just how little time we have and how that can kind of narrow down like a lot of.
Well, I think it's
things.
Also like, because that's the same with anything, your experience of it and how you then just apply that to the whole world. I think a human can't actually take in all the information that's out there, understand everything. So we just have to narrow things down, which means that people get divided and have different opinions. And there is just that kind of structure of things, like separation of things, and you just accept your way of boxing things up, and you live that boxed life. But that's the only thing you can do. You can't live it.
Yeah, you have to you have to categorize and pigeonhole basically, just in order to function day to day. Like if I'm walking down the street and there's some young bloke that looks really dodgy coming towards me, I'm going to stereotype him and think I might cross the road, versus a little old lady, like we were saying recently, like a little old lady with a basket. I'm not going to think I'm stereotyping them, but just you can't there's not enough time to treat everyone as an individual. Like, you can treat some of the people that come into your life for a significant amount of time as individuals, and you can obviously treat them in an individual in a sense, but you're still having to generalize constantly as a human being just to function in the world. You're constantly having to make certain calls basically based on your experience and your life and the averages in your life and all this stuff. And you're totally right. It's an interesting thing to think about. Let's do this. Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you want my help personally, you can book a one-on-one training session. Drop me a message. My email is in the description. And if you feel like this message was of value, then please feel free to make a donation equal to that value. Again, donation link is in the description. And finally, please share this video with other singers you know. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up. And I will see you in another video. Bye.